After years of will they, won't they, TikTok has a deal that will keep the social media platform operating in the United States indefinitely. For years, the US has threatened to ban TikTok over concerns that its parent company, ByteDance, was funneling user information to the Chinese government. But this new deal actually does very little to address that, because the concerns with TikTok were never really about the Chinese being in our Wi-Fi.
Mr. Chu, does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
They were far more about things like this.
TikTok users may well be President Trump's latest adversary after fewer than 7,000 people attended his weekend campaign rally in Tulsa, thanks to a secret campaign on TikTok.
That our students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok.
If anything, TikTok's new deal opens the platform up to far more interference, and more importantly, to censorship and control, while giving its new owners even more access to user data that they have explicitly said they want to use for surveillance and to train AI. So who are the new owners of TikTok, and what do they really want? Let me quickly address China, because ostensibly that's what this whole thing is about. In 2019, the Peterson Institute, a respected think tank, released an article saying that the EU and US governments were not taking the threat of foreign interference through TikTok seriously enough. These are valid concerns. ByteDance could technically be ordered by the CCP to give them user information. ByteDance protected users around the world from this by storing their data locally. In the case of the United States, that meant a data center in Texas owned by Oracle. Both Biden and Trump said that ByteDance had to divest themselves of ownership of TikTok or have it banned in the United States, until a deal was finally reached on January 22nd, 2026. So let's stick with China here for a moment. ByteDance divested 80% of its ownership in TikTok US, remaining its single largest shareholder at 19.9%. But far more importantly is what ByteDance continues to own. ByteDance owns the algorithm, the secret sauce that has made TikTok what it is, but they'll lease it to the American companies who will then tweak it for an American audience. They also own e-commerce, a $500 billion business on the Chinese version of TikTok, and a growing source of revenue in the US. They also remain in control of ads and how the US version of the app works with global TikTok. These are important parts of the deal because not only does ByteDance remain in control of some important parts of the app, they're making most of the money, on top of additional licensing fees and revenue percentages paid to them by the US group. Another major player at 15% ownership is MGX, the UAE's sovereign wealth fund, that is partnered with a tech investment company called G42. G42, under the Biden administration, was flagged by the CIA and other national security agencies as a threat because of its deep connections to a number of Chinese companies, including Huawei. So if anything, this deal has added another company into the mix who has the potential to leak data to the Chinese. The rest of the deal includes Silver Lake, an American investment company with connections to Oracle, MGX, and G42, as well as a host of smaller investors, the most notable name among them being Michael Dell. But the final 15% is the most important. That one belongs to Oracle. Everything you need to know about this deal comes back to Oracle and its founder, Larry Ellison. Ellison is a longtime Trump ally and super donor. He's donated hundreds of millions of dollars to the Tony Blair Institute, which we'll get to, and has given the single largest donation in history to the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces at $16.6 million in 2017. Oracle owns data centers and manages massive databases for companies and the US government. Their clients include United Healthcare, Citibank, Netflix, Amazon, the Department of Defense, the CIA, and they even sell cheap body cams for cops. What Oracle also has is user data. A lot of user data for millions of Americans, their banking information, healthcare information, purchase history, viewing preferences, and now that they are not simply hosting TikTok's data but own a portion of it, increased access to their location, race, gender, sexual preferences, political affiliations, etc., etc. So what do they want to do with all this information? Well, here's Larry Ellison in February 2025 at the World Government Summit.
The first thing a country needs to do is to unify all of their data so it can be consumed and used by the AI model. We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it into a single, if you will, unified data platform. So we provide context. When we want to ask a question, we've provided that AI model with all the data they need to understand our country.
It's pretty simple. Money. If Oracle can amass all user data in one place, they can scrub it with their AI and determine the best way to sell them products and services. That's the low-hanging fruit. But far more than profiting off of user data, this fits into the Ellison family's broader goal of controlling information. Larry Ellison's son, David, bought and then appointed himself the CEO and chairman of Paramount Skydance, giving the family control over CBS. Paramount is now in the process of trying to buy Warner Brothers, which would give them control over CNN as well. Ellison is also a huge fan of surveillance.
Where do you come down on what NSA is doing?
We've been collecting this information for so long, and long before NSA was collecting it. Let me tell you who was collecting it. American Express, Bank of Visa, all of your credit card data. We have all of your financial records. This whole issue of privacy is utterly fascinating to me. Who's ever heard of this information being misused by the government? In what way?
Well, I just hear you clearly. You're saying whatever the NSA is doing is okay with me.
It's great. It's great. It's essential.
But what point would it be alarming for you in terms of government surveillance? At what point would your red line be crossed?
If the government used it to do political targeting, if the Democrats used it to go after Republicans, if the Republicans used it to go after Democrats. In other words, if it became we stopped looking for terrorists and we started looking for people with on the other side of the aisle. Everyone would see it. Your body cams will be transmitting that. The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
But beyond that, TikTok has long been an ideological problem for certain figures on the right. There is some speculation that this whole fight with TikTok didn't originate because of security concerns, but because TikTok was used in some high-profile pranks on Trump's campaign leading up to the 2020 election. Larry Ellison and Oracle will now control TikTok's US algorithm, meaning they will directly influence what content is pushed and what is not. Within the first few days of the changeover, users on TikTok complained that A, the app was just not working, and B, that their content was being censored.
Some users now say the app is censoring and limiting their content, including posts and messages about Jeffrey Epstein and the shooting deaths of US citizens by federal agents in Minneapolis. One content creator says his US-based followers couldn't access his post about the shooting death of Renee Good.
The spokesperson blamed it on a power outage at a data center, but that, of course, doesn't make any sense. But silencing voices that are critical of Trump is just one way that Oracle could use TikTok. They may also use their new power to influence another group that has been a pain in the side of politicians and technocrats of all stripes.
Some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok.
This is not simply an ideological issue. Although Israel is a close ally of the United States and suppressing anti-Israeli voices is a credible concern. The bigger picture is that Oracle stands to profit significantly from the redevelopment of Gaza, and changing public opinion on that may be one of their goals in the short term. There are a number of tabled plans for the redevelopment of Gaza. One that's been put forward by the Tony Blair Institute, which I'll remind you is primarily funded by Larry Ellison, envisions Gaza including extensive AI surveillance and data collection, which Oracle is uniquely positioned to capitalize on. The other, what's called the Great Trust, includes the American Data Safe Haven, which would hold regional data centers with special US AI regulations. Now, who could build and manage such data centers? Which is how this all comes back to TikTok. Limiting voices who might call into question the disturbing use of surveillance and data collection in Gaza's redevelopment or the fact that American technocrats are the ones directly benefiting from the redevelopment of a war-torn region, could result directly in profit and influence for people like Larry Ellison. In America, 1 in 5 people get their news from TikTok. This isn't about simply influencing content that is critical of Trump or critical of a Gaza redevelopment plan. When coupled with control of CBS and CNN, the Ellison family has dramatic influence over the platforms where tens of millions of Americans get their news. You're worried about censorship and interference from China? The call was coming from inside the house. All of this paints a frightening picture for free, unbiased information in the United States. While China, for example, has explicit state control over news, which is bad, the United States is quickly approaching a situation where they have almost exactly the same thing, but with one degree of separation. Meta, X, TikTok, Google, CNN, CBS, The Washington Post, ABC, to name a few, are all owned by either explicit Trump allies or those who have changed their platforms to better adhere to the Trump administration. So where does this leave us? Well, some Americans have seen how alarming this all is and are leaving TikTok. App deletions are up 150% since the deal. But there isn't really anywhere for them to go that doesn't share at least some of the same problems. TikTok is likely to go the route of X and become more explicitly right-wing, as retraining the algorithm to push that content is now directly profitable to those who own the platform, which contributes to a polarization not only of ourselves, but of the social platforms we are on. Meanwhile, perhaps the biggest winner is ByteDance, who will continue to make huge profits off of TikTok US while no longer having to deal with the political headache, and Trump and his allies get to make another social media platform their playground, while collecting even more information from US citizens. But hey, at least China probably won't be able to sneak into your Wi-Fi's.
So if I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to access the network to get connections to the internet, if that's the question.
That's the video. Thanks so much for watching. If you like content like this, please like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. Also, special thank you, as always, to everyone over at Patreon. If you want to support independent content, you can do so over there. The link will be in the description. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.